So there you hear it again. No evidence of any Trump-Russia collusion. And you're hearing it from Democrats. You're hearing it from Comey and Clapper and Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein and Joe Manchin and John Brennan and Adam Schiff, Jay Johnson, all saying the same thing. Hillary claiming there's no conflict of interest in the Uranium One deal. Why would anyone give a hostile actor, Vladimir Putin, 20% of our uranium? And Uranium One stories are baloney. They've been debunked. Nothing's been debunked. Everything is now coming out for far worse. Joining us now, former Speaker of the House. His new best-selling book, by the way, is just out. It's called Vengeance. And he joins us, also a Fox News contributor. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, and I share some of your amazement, although this is going pretty much as we predicted it would. He's trying to find somebody he can flip. There are rumors that he cut a deal with George Papadopoulos, who actually, there are rumors, may have been wearing a wire and sent back in to see if he could entrap somebody. He clearly was trying to frighten Manafort into turning over and going state's evidence, and apparently Manafort has not agreed to do that. And I just think that there's a lot here that frankly, Congress ought to look at. I'm still deeply bothered as an American that Mueller's people would raid Manafort's home at 5 a.m. with he and his wife still in their pajamas. And this is, there are no allegations here that justify that kind of assault on a home. And I think it's all done to terrorize and to frighten so that people will decide to do whatever the FBI wants them to. And I think that should worry people. I don't think you want to live in a country where the government has that kind of power to break into your home, scare you half to death, and then say, all right, do what we want, or you're going to prison. And this all...
Well, add to that, it's a 93% Hillary district. That's where Robert Mueller has to now, look for indictments. It doesn't seem like it's a fair deal for anybody. I mean, that's why Ken Starr couldn't get an indictment and a conviction when he was looking into the Clintons years ago, because look at the grand jury. Politically, they are on one side and only one side.
Yeah, that's actually a problem we're going to have to look into as a country, because an awful lot of our most important cases take place in the District of Columbia, and the District of Columbia now is one of the most left-wing enclaves in the whole country, and therefore you have a hugely difficult time getting a fair jury trial. I also think it's important to remember that as you've been pointing out, you go through all of this, you hire all of these attorneys, you have all of these FBI agents, you spend all this money, supposedly because you're looking into Russian interference in the election, and you come up with some indictments that relate to activities in 2012 and 2014 before Trump ever announced for president. I mean, there's zero relationship, except, of course, what Mueller's trying to do is scare Manafort into turning state's evidence, and this was the case, as you'll remember, with Scooter Libby, who ultimately preferred to tell the truth and go to jail rather than allow the prosecutor to get him to testify against Vice President Cheney. And the prosecutor had no interest in Libby except for the purpose of going after the vice president. And these things are very dangerous. We have no idea where this is going to go. But I think the acid test for Mueller is simple. Is he going to spend the same level of energy on Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, Uranium One, the Podesta brothers? I mean, if he wants to prove that he really is a reputable person and not just a liberal Democratic hack, he has a simple way to do it. Make sure that he now broadens his net to go after Russian influence peddling starting in 2009, when we have pretty clear evidence that they were doing everything they could to get access to our uranium supply.
I totally agree with all of this, but, I think some people have the wrong view, Robert Mueller, and I think you were willing more than, say, I was, to give him the benefit of the doubt in the beginning, and then I look at the people that he's hired, and you got you got people, the majority of which are Democratic Clinton, Obama donors. And then, for example, look at his choice. Look at this guy, Andrew Weissman, who's the lead counsel in this particular case. And look at, his background and his experience and some of the cases he's been involved in and the tactics that he's used. You got to stop and watch and say, wow, it's breathtaking what he did with Enron. It's breathtaking what he's done with other individuals. And his tactics seem totally inconsistent with the belief of fair play with a prosecutor. It seems like prosecutorial abuse every time.
Weissman is a key player in a book called License to Lie by Powell, and it is a very sobering book. It's about several cases, including Senator Stevens in Alaska, where literally the prosecutor had the note from Stevens in his own hand to his contractor saying, charge me personally for everything. I do not want to use any taxpayer money. And they deliberately hid the note. And he was ultimately reprimanded by the Supreme Court. The same thing with Weissman. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that they had misinformed the jury and destroyed Arthur Anderson. I mean, 89 or 90,000 people lost their jobs because of Weissman, and this is the kind of person that Mueller has picked, and that's why I changed my tune on Mueller when I began to realize who he was hiring. I realized that his law firm had donated 99% of its money to Hillary. I realized that he was, in fact, manipulated into being by Comey through, as Comey told us, through his clever leak to the New York Times to get a special counsel. And then you go back and you realize that when they looked seriously at the Uranium One deal and they were seriously looking at an FBI investigation, it's Mueller as head of the FBI and Rosenstein who is the prosecutor, and they decide not to pursue it. And you have to look back on that and say, okay, now, these are the same people who are now going after Manafort, but they didn't think $145 million in money going into a Canadian foundation that was secret and not reported to the U.S. government, they didn't think that mattered.
I think it's insane. And the fact that the same players are involved in this. I mean, they knew in 2009 about bribery and extortion and kickbacks and money laundering and racketeering. And they knew that Vladimir Putin had agents in the United States for the very purpose of cornering part of our uranium market. And Mueller knew, and Holder knew, and Rosenstein knew, and in the case of Hillary, she had to know, I assume, at some point. And Holder signs off on the deal, and Hillary signs off on the deal. They did nothing in terms of prosecuting or stopping Putin because he was successful. And so my big question is, what did America get out of this, giving Vladimir Putin and Russia 20% of our uranium? How do we benefit from that?
Well, and I think what you realize is the people who benefited from that were the Clintons. I mean,
why would Obama and Holder sign off on it?
Well, first of all, let me say, I have no idea. Although they're all part of the same gang. You know, you have to understand this is a nest of corruption. As Alan Guelzo, the history professor at Gettysburg College, has said, this may be Obama may have led the most corrupt administration in American history. So this was just one more piece of corruption. Why would they notice it?
Right, I want to ask you more about Mueller when we get back. I want to ask you more about Fusion GPS. Newt Gingrich, by the way, his brand new book is out. It's called Vengeance. Literally a novel ripped from today's headlines. It'll scare the living daylights out of you. I've been reading it. It's pretty spectacular. I'm sure it's going to be a movie one day. As we continue with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, and I want to ask you, and the author of the best-selling book, Vengeance, let me ask you about Fusion GPS. Now, everything that Trump is being accused of, we're now learning Hillary Clinton funded the phony, salacious dossier full of Russian propaganda, misinformation, disinformation. She funded it, the DNC funded it, and we learned this weekend Obama funded it, and they all ran the money through the same law firm. The very thing that they said Trump was doing, or Papadopoulos wanted to do but never got done. What's your reaction?
Let me say, first of all, I think that Trey Gowdy, who has been a prosecutor and who, as a chairman of a committee, did an in-depth investigation of what happened in Benghazi. Gowdy said a couple of days ago, you cannot claim the protection of a law firm and the idea of client confidentiality when you have this kind of activity underway. To do that would mean that, in theory, a campaign could funnel all of its money through a law firm and never report anything. So, again, here's a perfect example where the Congress should intervene and demand that the law firm make public all of its records. Where did the money come from? What was the money used for? This is clearly a tainted conspiratorial institution. This particular law firm has its hand in so many different pockets that it is a matter of national interest to find out exactly who was paying for what. They all thought they were being clever. I think this is something Sean, I predict, is going to come up again and again. These are very arrogant people who are overeducated and who believe the rest of us are stupid. And they believed they could get away with these kind of things. In Hillary's case, she has believed it ever since she made money off of cattle futures when Bill was a freshman governor. And she has always believed that it's her right to rip the rest of us off, and that she has the arrogance to believe we're too stupid to know she's doing it. And she has enough lawyers to protect her while she does it. And I think this is just part of the same pattern. And sadly, Obama turned out to be a perfect example of a corrupt Chicago politician who has presided over this kind of behavior while pretending to be above it all.
Last question. I'm looking at the Drudge report today. Great again. It has a picture of the president. Consumer confidence soaring. Home prices all-time high. Economy now, we have 2 quarters of over 3% GDP growth. Then you've got the lowest food stamp usage ever. The fewer number of people in poverty ever. And you got more people participating in the labor force and when I say ever, in the last 8 years, than we've had in the last 8 years. So jobs are coming back, and we don't even have the president's, tax reform plan done and economic stimulus done.
Well, that proves that you are probably dealing in reality, and therefore you should not be allowed into any liberal group. Every liberal in the country is going to say, so what?
I'm so upset. By the way, I once tried to get into a country club, and liberals stopped me from getting in.
So there you go. They're going to look at all this data and they're going to shrug it off, but I'll tell you what's going to happen. The country's not going to shrug it off. If the president gets this tax cut through and if the economy keeps booming, Republicans will win in 18 and win in 20, and we will take the country back from the left despite all of their efforts.
And that is a must-do, or else all bets are off for the Republicans.
Exactly. And they've got to pass the tax cuts.
All right, Mr. Speaker, congrats on the new book. Really appreciate you being here.